Hey everybody, 2's Spider-Man here. I got here a little before that gaming retrospectives guy because I wanted to tell ya, try to be nice to him, okay? If you guys like learning about the history of video games, like this video and subscribe to support his channel because, well, this is kind of all he's got.
Hey everybody, Dusty with Gaming Retrospectives here, and today we're going to talk about... Hey, what are you doing here already?
Oh, nothing, just telling people how awesome I am and gracing them with my fantastic presence.
Alright, well, are you ready to start?
Sure, let's do it. Shh.
Alright guys, well if you haven't watched the first video, I'll link it down in the description and put a title card up there for you. I'd recommend you watch that before watching this one. In the last video we talked about Spider-Man 1 and 2 for the PlayStation 1, and in addition to continuing to talk about what we love about Spider-Man games. Now we're going to be diving into Spider-Man the movie-based game, as well as talk about how Spider-Man 2's web swinging mechanics completely changed how we control Spider-Man. Is it still as good as you remember? Let's find out. Spider-Man, based on the first movie, while still under the Activision banner, was now being developed by Treyarch, which took the reins from Vicarious Visions after Spider-Man 2 on the PlayStation 1.
Oh, are you talking about the guys that make Call of Duty? Like pew 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 pew.
Yeah, those guys.
Sarge, I'm not gonna make it.
Anyway, the game's story is basically Spider-Man 1. They do throw a few new elements in there to spice things up, and we'll talk about a couple of those things, but for the most part, the main storyline of the game is Spider-Man 1 the movie. I feel like Spider-Man 1 doesn't get talked about a whole lot just because Spider-Man 2 overshadowed it in so many ways, but the big thing you'll notice with this game compared to future games in the series is that the gameplay is very similar, eerily similar in fact, to Spider-Man 1 and 2 on the PlayStation 1.
Oh cool, you can see down to the streets below. Time to jump down and mess with some pedestrians. Alright, here we go.
No, wait, I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Oh wait, what happened? What the f***?
That's what I was trying to tell you. Even though you can see the streets, it's the same as the previous Spider-Man games, where if you go too far down, you'll actually die right away.
Well, that sucks. Can't we just play Spider-Man 2 already?
Don't worry, we'll get there, but first we need to talk about Spider-Man 1 and everything that led up to the creation of Spider-Man 2.
Fine, hurry up.
Gameplay-wise, Spider-Man the movie-based game is almost a carbon copy of the first two Spider-Man games on PlayStation 1. The default attack animations are the exact same, and I mean exactly the same. You still have your web fists, web ball, and web shield / web explosion attack. And Spider-Man's web swinging is basically the same as the other games too. Your web attaches to the sky and not to the buildings, and you can basically just swing along as much as you want to without having to worry about any type of physics. And you can still web zip to specific parts of the wall or straight to the ceiling and crawl along the ceiling for a stealthy approach if you need to. You even have awesome levels that take place in where else but the sewers, because we all know how much Spider-Man loves being underground.
More sewer levels? Are you serious? Why did they think I love the sewers so stinking much?
Well, I think we were stuck in a similar situation as we were with the PlayStation 1. Developers were still trying to figure out how to harness the power of the system since it had just been released not too long before this. So again, having indoor levels enabled the developers to have more content in the game, although it was a little disappointing to me having to play the same game again when we had already essentially played it twice on the PlayStation 1. It basically just ended up feeling like an upgraded Spider-Man from the previous console generation. But due to the fact that this game was based on the movie and was a licensed Sony property, they weren't able to use other characters as they did in the original two Spider-Man games, so the game definitely felt like it had lost some of that Marvel magic that we had from before. Now everything wasn't completely the same. You did have an upgraded combo system, so in addition to your original combos, you also had additional ones that you could collect as you found gold spider tokens throughout the game. And although they do include some of the obligatory chase sequences in this game, they do give you some new villains to fight that weren't in the movies, such as Vulture, Shocker, and Scorpion.
Why do they have to put so many chase sequences in all of these games? Boring.
Yeah, they're not really my favorite either. As far as voice acting, they were able to get Tobey Maguire to reprise his role as Spider-Man, which I thought was a pretty neat addition too.
Are you kidding me? That guy didn't do me any justice at all. He totally phoned it in.
Now, Vulture, you can't go around taking things that don't belong to you. What kind of example does it set for impressionable youngsters out there?
I am Toby Maguire. Give me large sums of money for this voice acting gig, or I shall malfunction.
Okay, I didn't think he was that bad. Anyway, like the previous 2 console entries, the game does offer some cheats as well as some bonuses after you beat the game. One of my personal favorite cheats is the Matrix mode that makes Spidey's attacks slow motion.
Hey, check this out. There is no spoon. Oh, my back!
Oh, are you okay?
Just keep going, keep going.
Alright. Similar to the previous games, they have a couple of extra costumes that you can wear, although not near the selection of the older games. A few extra mini games you can do, such as racing through checkpoints and fighting enemies in an arena, and probably the strangest one of all, human bowling. But before we get to Spider-Man 2, without question, one of the coolest things you can do in this game is to be able to play through the game as the Green Goblin after beating it on Hero difficulty or higher, which completely changes how you play. As you can see here, he's got his glider, which allows him to easily fly around the city as opposed to swinging. And although he does have the exact same combos that Spider-Man uses, he's got a few new tools in his arsenal, such as the ability to run really fast. His glider has a machine gun and can also shoot other arrows and bombs. And on foot, he's got his other signature tools, such as the pumpkin bomb and other explosives that he can use to defeat his enemies. Overall, I'd say it's actually more fun playing through the game as the Green Goblin than it is as Spider-Man, just because he's so overpowered. And basically, you can just plow through any enemy or obstacle in the game without much of a problem at all. So while Spider-Man 1 reused a lot of ideas from the previous games, and it did have some flaws, this game would allow Treyarch to build the foundation for what was to become one of the most revered Spider-Man games of all time, in the movie-based Spider-Man 2.
Man, it's about time. I thought you'd never get to this point.
Oh, I see how it is. All of a sudden you're better now that we're talking about Spider-Man 2.
Well, duh, it's only about 1,000,000 times better than the first one. Of course I'm gonna come back for this. Plus, I've got that enhanced healing thing going on too.
That would come in pretty handy.
Oh, it does. It does.
While Spider-Man 2 again was based on the movie properties and not the comic book license. So because of that, unfortunately, we're not able to see a lot of the classic Marvel characters. But this game still had a lot going for it. One of the first things, and the best things in my opinion, and I didn't mention it when we were talking about Spider-Man 1, is that Bruce Campbell himself, aka Ash from the Evil Dead series, is back to narrate the game as you find hint tokens throughout the city. And he also narrates the training and tutorial missions as he did in Spider-Man 1. This made finding hint tokens as you roamed around the city more fun because you were curious to see what Bruce Campbell was going to say next.
Okay, so the next thing I want you to do is jump off the building. I mean it, just jump. Hey, I wouldn't tell you to do something dangerous and life-threatening, would I? Come on. You always do what people tell you. You know, there's a word for that. Loser.
Oh, Bruce Campbell is so cool.
Hey, I actually met him once.
You did? What was he like?
He was actually a pretty nice guy.
I knew it.
Why do you even care about him? You're Spider-Man.
Hey, even superheroes have to have their own heroes too.
Well, this game did offer a ton of new features over its predecessors, namely the ability to finally go all the way down to the street and interact with pedestrians in a huge open-world sprawling city. It also had a much-needed upgrade to the combat system, a small bump up in graphics, and a better soundtrack. But without a doubt, what this game will be known for, and the number 2 thing that we love about Spider-Man games, the web swinging. And while it is a little difficult to pick up at first due to its manual control, once you learn the mechanics and get it down, it can be a beautiful thing.
Haha, just watch the master at work. What'd you think of that?
Haha!
Shut up.
There was a good reason why Spider-Man 2's web swinging had been emulated by subsequent developers, arguably unsuccessfully over the last few years, mainly because Spider-Man 2's web swinging had been perfected to such an extent that almost no one could compete with how good it was. Spider-Man could change direction in the air instantly, run on walls, either sideways or straight up in the air. He had the ability to use a charge jump in which you could charge your swing at the bottom for more speed or at the top for more height, or off the ground to begin your swing or jump across buildings. The other big addition to the web swing, as you're seeing here, was Spider-Man's ability to shoot out 2 webs at once, which allowed him again to either change direction quickly if he needed to, or slingshot himself across large portions of the map. This skill would come into play to a lesser extent in Web of Shadows later on, and even the newest Spider-Man game you see him using 2 webs to web zip. Speaking of web zipping, it was done a little differently in this game in that instead of making you go right to the ceiling or to a wall, this was the first time it was used to maintain your momentum or to change direction as you're swinging around the city. And as you can see, all of Spider-Man's webs had to attach to buildings and no longer just magically attach to the sky. Other Spider-Man games had done web swinging well enough in their own way, but none were able to completely emulate what Spider-Man 2 did, and offered you the absolute manual control that you had over Spider-Man and how he moved around. This game essentially built the foundation for Spider-Man's web swinging from here on out, and in my opinion it still holds up very well to the newer versions of Spider-Man's web swinging that we have today. There was mainly one person responsible for the way that Spider-Man 2's web swinging mechanics worked, a man by the name of Jamie Fristrom. In an interview with WarpZone.com in 2013, Jamie was asked about the development of the web swinging mechanics in Spider-Man 2. Previously, Spider-Man games were like the first cartoon from the early 70s. You weren't sure what his webs were attaching to exactly, and you tried to pretend that there must be some really tall building just out of sight, but you had to really strain your disbelief. So when working on Spider-Man, that literally kept me awake at nights, thinking about some way to make it more realistic, but without making it too hard to control. A little known fact is that I started prototyping the web slinging engine about a third of the way into Spider-Man 1, but we'd already progressed so far on that game it was too late to switch horses. So we put it on the back burner until Spider-Man 2, and then got to really make it happen.
I'll have you know that sticking your webs to the sky is a lost art form that took me years to perfect.
They then asked him about the reception that it got, and how it was considered to potentially be one of the greatest games of all time just based on the web swinging alone. We all thought it was really cool. The testers loved it. I don't know about greatest games of all time, but we thought we had something special. Our biggest worry was that it was still too difficult to control, that we were making a game for an audience that just wanted a game to go with their movie, and they wouldn't want to put in the effort to get past the learning curve. It's a good thing they decided against that mentality because we would have probably gotten another very mediocre movie-based game should that have happened. Interestingly enough, after Fristrom left Treyarch, he tried to recapture the magic of Spider-Man 2 swinging by creating his own game, which was called Energy Hook, that released for the PS4 and Steam a couple of years ago. The game incorporated a lot of similar elements to Spider-Man 2, such as the swinging, the boosting mechanics, running on walls, doing tricks in midair, and more. However, the game didn't appear to capture Spider-Man 2's magic quite as well as anyone had hoped. And the swinging itself wasn't quite as good as Spider-Man 2's. But you do have to give Jamie credit for trying to recreate this experience because he essentially did most of the work on his own. So if you guys ever get a chance to play it, I would check it out if you're craving more of Spider-Man 2's swinging for that fix. In summary, Spider-Man 2's web swinging was a perfection on a formula that many other companies tried to emulate but could never duplicate. There are some games that came close, however, and had a few different mechanics, and we'll talk about that later, but this game definitely left developers with huge shoes to fill in future entries, and even Treyarch themselves would have a hard time replicating its success. Spider-Man 2's combat was much improved as well in that it didn't copy any of the earlier games in the franchise. The dial-a-combo system was still in place, but his combat techniques felt a lot closer to what Spider-Man would utilize in battle.
Let me guess. Did it make you feel like Spider-Man?
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say.
Yeah, I heard that was a pretty common phrase these days. I would just avoid it.
Well, in addition to that, Spider-Man could use his Spider Reflex mode to slow down time and improve his attack strength. But probably the most important aspect that other superhero games would use later on was the ability to dodge attacks whenever you saw Spider-Man's head flash, as it would be used to great success in the Batman Arkham games, as well as Insomniac's own Spider-Man game that was just released.
Hell yeah! Everyone else thought Batman was the one who came up with the dodge mechanic, but it was me, baby! Me!
Spider-Man could also upgrade abilities with what were called hero points at various comic book stores scattered throughout the city. This gave you motivation to go around town, solve random crimes, and find tokens, as it would get you more hero points with which to unlock various moves throughout the game. And trust me, you guys have not lived until you've done a spinning pile driver off the top of the Empire State Building to a random thug. How do you keep doing all this weird stuff?
Hello, I'm a superhero.
But those aren't even your You know what, never mind. Besides the swinging and fighting, the developers added more content in the form of collectible tokens and race challenges. And let me tell you, if you guys like racing and collecting tokens, this game is for you. There are dozens and dozens of races, I believe over 50 in all, as well as skyscraper tokens, hideout tokens, secret tokens, finding all the hint markers. There was even a rumor going around that if you collected all the tokens and did everything there was to do in the game, that you could fight against Dr. Connors, aka the Lizard, which was later proven to be untrue. However, despite all these upgrades, not all was perfect in the world of Spider-Man 2. One of the main things that you'll notice when playing through Spider-Man 2 is the random crimes that are scattered throughout the city as you play, as well as citizens with question marks above their heads that need your help. While they can be fun at first, one of the issues that occurs is the repetition that you experience as you go through and solve these crimes. There are truly only a handful of crimes for you to go through and solve, ranging from rescuing someone off the side of a building, to stopping a random break-in, stopping a robbery of an armed security vehicle, taking an injured person to a hospital, stopping the theft of a vehicle, and a few more. There are always slight variations on each crime as you stop them, but most of the time it boils down to beating up thugs or grabbing a person in need. The biggest issue with the random crimes is that in order to progress in each chapter, there's a required amount of hero points that you have to earn. So whether you want to do the random crimes or not, you're almost forced to due to the structure of the game. So by the time you get to the end, you'll have seen almost every crime multiple times. Many people still did like this system in that it added more variety to the gameplay, as well as something to do after you beat the game. These random crimes were also used in other Spider-Man games to varying degrees of success, but this is the game where it all started.
Yeah, I am not grabbing more lost balloons for any more whiny kids, you hear me? That's it! It haunts my dreams, man.
Come back! Back! Oh no, my balloon! My balloon!
Oh geez, stop! What is wrong with you?
Sorry, just messing with you. But of all the side activities, of course, what would Spider-Man 2 be without talking about the pizza delivery missions?
Ah yes, grazie. I never thought you'd bring up the pizza delivery missions. It's a pizza time.
Where do you get all these outfits? So the much celebrated, often hated pizza delivery missions can be pretty easy at first, but the later ones ramp up the challenge pretty quickly. You don't want to do tricks in the air or land too hard when you're doing the pizza deliveries because you'll jostle the box and damage the pizza, and you only have a few times of doing that before you fail the mission. I always found these missions to be weirdly fun, even though I typically hate racing and checkpoint style missions, just because they're so ridiculous. I always thought it was funny how Treyarch decided to take one scene from the movie and turn it into a series of missions. But this is Spider-Man that we're talking about here, and one of the ways that he gets through life is never taking himself too seriously.
That's alright. Now who wants a slice of this tasty pie?
No thanks, I already ate.
Aw, mamma mia.
I think that phrase might be trademarked. Finally, just like the last game, they do add a few other characters into the game to make it more interesting besides just the movie characters. And it's also worth noting that this is one of the first times that you can wander around as Peter Parker and not just Spider-Man, even though it's mainly restricted to being inside the Daily Bugle to accept missions. And while they're simple for the most part, they do add boss fights against the likes of Rhino, a fairly ridiculous scenario against Mysterio in which you have to swing all the way out to Liberty Island in order to take out one of his devices. And then you end up in his funhouse in which you have to fight clone Spider-Man that come out of mirrors, before you finally end up meeting him in one of the buildings outside in the city and end up punching him in the face once to defeat him. And this is all after a series of challenges he presents to you as Quentin Beck, in which he makes you toss prison inmates into holes for points and crawl through a maze to see if you can get to him before you get hit 3 times.
Sheh, Mysterio's such a douche.
They sure did give him a lot of attention in this one though. And Black Cat is back once again, even though she's mainly used to create more chase sequences.
Whoa! Who cares about that? Talk about a graphical upgrade.
Alright, settle down now, let's wrap this up. So again, as this follows the main plot of the movie, the final fight takes place in the warehouse where Doc Ock has his machine, and you have to take it out before it destroys the city. After defeating him, the final scene plays out in the same way, as Dr. Octopus goes down with his invention. You can keep playing the game after you defeat Dr. Octopus, continuing to go about the city and solve random crimes, and collect hero points to upgrade your abilities more. In fact, the final swing upgrade to boost your swing speed to the maximum level is 50,000 hero points. There are also cheats you can put into this one too, mainly to start you off with more hero points or advance you further in the game without having to play it. Finally, there's also a theater in which you can watch the movies from the game, and another arena-style type mode where you fight waves of enemies. Overall, Spider-Man 2 was an experience that would be unmatched by future games in the series for a long time to come. It was a very innovative game that began a lot of concepts that Spider-Man games even use today, with one of the most revolutionary swinging systems that a Spider-Man game would ever have. It's really managed to stand the test of time. So let me know down below, what do you guys think about Spider-Man 2 swinging? Do you think it's as good as it once was? Do you think it's the best? Or do you think other games have surpassed it, especially the new one? Join me next time as we take a look at Ultimate Spider-Man, which had a much more comic-style take on the character, and at the movie-based Spider-Man 3.
Oh no, we're playing Spider-Man 3 next?
Yeah, that's the plan.
You do know how awful that game is, right?
Now we'll see, it's maybe not as bad as you remember.
You fool! Just think about the movie. The movie.
Now we'll see, I'm willing to give it another shot.
Fine. Then I'll just leave you with this.
Wait, no, not Emo Peter. Anything but that. No!